New videos every day.
You could take Dick Cheney or whoever and waterboard him for a couple hours. I don't think he's going to say that was pleasant. Mm-hmm. He's going to say it was horrifying. It was frightening. I thought I was going to die. Mm-hmm. Then somebody's going to say that's not torture. Doesn't make any sense to me.
Thank you for tuning in to Alternative Health. I'm your host, Karina Rachel, and I'm joined today by Dr. Colin Ross. Today's topic is torture by the CIA, and I'm anxious to see your feedback and know your thoughts. Is torture okay? Is torture justified? Be sure to let me know. Thank you so much for joining me today, Dr. Ross.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So we've done several videos about CIA mind control and interrogation techniques. What are your thoughts on torture? We've seen a lot about the use of torture recently in the headlines. What are your thoughts?
Well, I have a bunch of different thoughts. There's been several different surveys recently, and it's around about a 50-50 split in the American population in general. 50% are in favor of CIA torture and 50% are against. So obviously there's a lot of divergence in opinions. So the first question is, what is torture? And is the CIA, or has the CIA in fact been doing torture? And then you get into all this legal debate and all this posturing, oh, this is torture, this isn't torture. Mm-hmm. So I'd rather sidestep whether it's actually torture, but I think it is. Mm-hmm. And now we're talking about waterboarding and extreme techniques. Actually, my position on it is, number one, I'm a civilian. There's all this classified information. You can't really come to a real decision based on real knowledge about, is it effective? Is it not effective? Has it prevented any attacks on American soil? Mm-hmm. Because all the information you need to make that decision is all classified. Right. So in the public, we're really all having all these opinions and all these points of view, but we don't actually know. Mm-hmm. And then the people who are talking to us from the government, from past governments, from the CIA, how much can you believe what they've got to say? Mm-hmm. So it's really this fog where it's hard to have a solid opinion. But my personal opinion would be, if it's not torture, like, what's the point of the exercise? So if you just divide it into two categories, you're either going to talk to a detainee, interrogate him. You might do some good cop, bad cop. You might try making friends. You might try inducements. You might try financial incentives. Now, if that's not working, you're going to have to ramp it up to the next level, right? Mm-hmm. There's no point in ramping it up to the next level if you're not doing something frightening, scary, painful, that is at least a sort of mild form of torture. Okay, so we'll say we're not going to call that torture. We're going to call that physical influence or something to make it sound nicer. But once you ramp up to the top level of physical influence, I mean, you could take Dick Cheney or whoever and waterboard him for a couple hours. I don't think he's going to say that was pleasant. Mm-hmm. He's going to say it was horrifying. It was frightening. I thought I was going to die. Mm-hmm. Then somebody's going to say that's not torture. Doesn't make any sense to me. Right. So to me, it clearly is torture. But
I agree.
But let's just sidestep the whole debate about, is it torture? Could you do that to your wife, make a video of it, take the video to the police department, and not be charged with a crime? Clearly impossible. Mm. So if anybody else was doing this in a civilian context, it clearly is criminal. Right. So then we get to, well, why is it okay for the government to do criminal activities on U.S. soil or at Abu Ghraib or Guantanamo Bay, which is technically U.S. soil, when it's not okay for civilians to do that? Mm-hmm. Well, then we go to, well, we're preventing future 9/11, but are we really? And then we're back to, we don't know for sure, because we're having to rely on people who told us that we're going into the Middle East to start a war because Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction and was involved in 9/11. We know that, in fact, he didn't have weapons of mass destruction, and he wasn't involved in 9/11, and he wasn't building a nuclear arsenal. So the top people in our government told us stuff to justify a war that wasn't true.
Right.
So why should we believe what they have to say about whether CIA enhanced interrogations are working or not?
Mm-hmm.
So then you're just back in this quandary. But what I've written about and talked about is CIA mind control programs, going back to the 50s up to the early 70s, and then they're classified after that. So back in that literature in the 50s and 60s, there was 4 different terms: mind control, brainwashing, thought reform, and coercive persuasion, which are actually all just meaning the same thing.
Right.
But so mind control was used sort of in science fiction and in talking about CIA mind control experiments.
Mm-hmm.
Thought reform, that phrase was usually used talking about Mao Zedong thought reform in communist China.
Right.
Coercive persuasion was more of an academic sort of interrogation literature term. But they all mean basically the same thing.
Right.
Enhanced interrogation is just another version of the same thing. So enhanced interrogation and mind control are all exactly the same thing. There's no reason to do enhanced interrogation except to get control of somebody's mind and make them confess to something.
Right.
Otherwise, what's the purpose?
Mm-hmm.
So enhanced interrogation is just the new sanitized term for mind control, which is the same as brainwashing. If we go back to MK Ultra, Bluebird, Artichoke, walking through the 50s, 60s into the early 70s, we see them contracting out a lot of the bits and pieces of what we've seen at Abu Ghraib and Guantanamo Bay.
Mm.
And this includes, so this is not a theory, this is known objective facts that everybody in the government agrees this is what's been going on. Sleep deprivation, sensory deprivation, which is hooding, being in forced, uncomfortable, very painful positions for many, many, many hours at a time, being shocked electrically, being forced to be naked and to masturbate and commit sex acts with female U.S. officers watching, so sexual humiliation, humiliation of your religion, attacking, stomping on, defiling the Quran book itself, different kinds of drugs being administered, attack dogs coming at you so you think you're being killed, mock executions, you think that somebody next door is being killed, listening to the sounds of other people screaming when they're being tortured, waterboarding. These are just basically the elements of the medieval torture dungeon.
Right.
So you couldn't put any ordinary person through all that and not have them say, I just got tortured.
Right.
So my personal, now I'm just not talking as a psychiatrist or talking about facts here, I'm just giving you my personal read on it. I'd say it's at best doubtful that any of this torture has actually, in fact, led to actionable intelligence that has actually prevented an attack. It may have, but nobody's giving us evidence because they're saying it's all classified. We should take their word for it, which I don't. But let's say it does work some. Like everything in life, you have to do a cost-benefit analysis. Okay, so the benefit is, if we actually prevented like 5,000 people dying in another 9/11, okay, that's a big benefit. But let's say we prevented a small suicide bomber operation from killing 20 people. Let's just say that happened. Okay, well, what's the price? That's a good thing. So we're glad that it got prevented. And we have to buy the idea that we wouldn't have been able to prevent that without the torture, which is pretty shaky. But even if, let's say that was true, what's the price we're paying as the United States of America? And I think part of the problem is that our culture in general and our politicians massively downplay the amount of blowback that goes on.
Right.
And it's like, we're just the good guys. We're doing what's necessary. We believe in freedom and democracy. We're helping the rest of the world be a better place. And everybody is saying thanks. It's just not the reality of it.
Right.
With all this torture and enhanced interrogation, we're doing nothing but making people angry at us, which is going to cause blowback, which is going to cause a bunch of deaths.
And
So
more threats to our homeland security.
So then we just get in a closed loop where we're justifying more interrogation because we've made more people angry at us. So maybe if we weren't doing all this stuff, the net balance would be we'd have less threat. Now, do I know that for a fact? No, but that's what I would bet. I doubt that any actual for real benefit that we couldn't have prevented this event without this enhanced interrogation is way offset by all the negative fallout we're getting and all the hostility we're getting.
Right.
Do I know for sure that's true? No. But as always, my main point is the involvement of psychiatrists and psychologists. So we know the names are known publicly now of two guys who ran enhanced interrogation programs who were psychologists. It's completely unethical. It's malpractice. It's criminal. It should result in successful class action lawsuits against those psychiatrists and psychologists. Should result in revocation of their licenses. Just like if they did that to a patient in their office. I mean, imagine if somebody had a video of my psychiatrist waterboarded me in his office and took it to the board and took it to a malpractice lawyer. What would happen? So it's just as much a violation of the Hippocratic Oath if you're doing it to a detainee. There's just no way from a medical ethics perspective that that's okay. Is it okay from a military intelligence, homeland security perspective? We can debate that on and off, back and forth. It cannot be justified from medical ethics perspective.
Right.
It just can't. And so that's one thing that definitely needs to stop, is involvement of psychiatrists and psychologists.
I agree with you there.
But then how would you run those programs without any doctors around? So really, you're just a stepping stone away from having to cancel the torture if you can't have any physicians available.
Right.
Or just accepting that when you push the guy too far, he dies. Too bad.
I think there's a lot of considerations here. I mean, clearly we could probably talk for several hours on this topic. But, when we talk about using these enhanced interrogation techniques to retrieve intelligence from a detainee, I just think it really calls into question the so-called intelligence that we're getting from a person who's under intense physical, emotional stress, physical pain. There's been several instances where they will get a detainee may actually admit to a crime or confess to a crime under these enhanced interrogation techniques. And it just really calls into question even more for me that intelligence that they are giving up when they're in this state of mind.
False confessions are a serious problem just in regular civilian law enforcement.
Right.
Where all you've done is bring the person to the police station and ask them some questions.
So, and among these people who do feel that that torture is justified, and this is an important part of our homeland security and of keeping Americans safe, etc., largely this whole breaching of ethics that you were talking about is made okay, I guess you can say, or is given to the public as being okay because the people who are being detained and who are being tortured have been dehumanized, again, by our media and our governmental officials who are hiding things from us. And I certainly understand that there is confidential information that they're not just going to put out to everyone. But at the same time, when we look at things like the mind control experiments from the 50s through the 70s, and we start to ask, well, there's a lot of things that have been kept from us by our CIA.
A lot of things.
So, and many of those experiments were done on civilians and on military personnel. So then we start to see that, these techniques and these tactics, they aren't only being used on our so-called enemies. And again, because so much is hidden from us, we just really don't know all the facts on the ground, so to speak. And it just makes the whole situation kind of a difficult thing to decide. Is it okay? Is it justified? Is this something that a country that prides itself on its freedom and democracy and fairness, is this enhanced interrogation something that is helping us or hurting us? What does it do to our integrity?
I personally just think it makes America look really bad. And it undermines the principles of freedom, democracy, fairness, liberty, justice. Mm-hmm. And I can't believe that the price is worth it.
Right.
That's my opinion.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us today. Is there anything else that you'd like to, share in closing of this video?
Just the main point being that enhanced interrogations are just a new, whitewashed, sanitized term for brainwashing, mind control, torture. They're all in the same ballpark. Mm-hmm. There's more severe forms, less severe forms. It's all the same stuff.
Mm-hmm. Torture by any other name,
right?
By any euphemism, is still torture. And I'm in agreement with you that this is not ethical behavior, that this is harming the integrity of our country and of our governmental officials. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I look forward to hearing your feedback to our discussion and hearing your thoughts. If you have any questions or topic requests, we welcome those as well. I hope that you'll subscribe to our channel, and I look forward to seeing you again next time. Thanks for watching.